Sup gamers, I'm a Shiny Sylveon and this is a Noob's Guide to Deathslinger. At the time of writing, I have less than 400 hours in Dead by Daylight, most of which I started amassing in October of 2023. In that time, however, I've found that I really enjoy playing Caleb Quinn, aka the Deathslinger, so while it might be too early to call it, he has been my main for the last few months. I'm mostly making this video to explain everything I know to people who might not know a whole lot about the Deathslinger and how he plays, because most of my long-term Twitch audience has never played Dead by Daylight before. Or, in the case of some of my streamer friends who are also similarly new to Dead by Daylight, they're scared of touching this killer because of how intimidating he looks to play. So that's mostly who this video is for, people newer to the game or the killer than I am. A lot of the specific information that you can find in this video is repeated from what I've learned from watching Akino's stellar in-depth guide to Deathslinger, which you can find the link for in the description for a much better player than myself. First things first, why play the Deathslinger? Why play this killer over other killers that have better ranged abilities like the Plague or the Huntress or even the Executioner? Why have I picked up this killer in particular and chosen to stick with him, and why should you, dear viewer, consider playing him yourself? I've chosen to continue playing this rootin, tootin, harpoon, shootin cowboy because he tends to manipulate the map like no other killer really can. The Deathslinger's power is a spear gun, which fires a teeny tiny projectile up to 18 meters away. 18 meters is about this far. If the projectile hits any part of the survivor's hitbox, the survivor is stunned, and then the Deathslinger can reel them in to close the distance between himself and the survivor. Once they're close enough, the slinger can melee the survivor, which puts them into the deep wound status effect, indicated by a yellow bar next to the survivor's name. The power also needs to be reloaded in between every single shot, and reloading slows the Deathslinger down significantly when he does it. Now you might be wondering, just how small is this projectile? For all my fellow MEABs out there, just look in your pants. It's small enough to where I can shoot through this. And this. You see the fences on these iconic staircases in Gideon Meat Plant? Yep. You're starting to get the picture, right? Any and every map now becomes a new opportunity to figure out new angles, and despite having a simplistic kit, his ability to manipulate every map's geometry makes him all that more exciting to learn. On top of that, some pallets become ludicrously unsafe against this killer because of his ability to pull the survivor around the back of them. In order to explain how that works, I need to explain the second part of Deathslinger's power, the chain. When a survivor is hit by the projectile, a meter for the durability of the chain appears on the bottom of the screen. Survivors can struggle against the chain to break it, and if the chain goes through an obstacle while the survivor is being reeled in, it breaks a lot faster. However, when the chain is broken, the survivor will still be injured and receive the deep wound status effect. If they were injured when the shot lands and the chain is broken again, they will receive deep wound, but will not go down. Survivors will only go down into the dying state if they are hit after being reeled in. And when the chain breaks, Deathslinger also gets stunned for 3 seconds. This means that in instances where landing a shot will result in a possible down, it is in your best interest to try and get that melee hit. If it doesn't land, then you'll get stunned, have to reload, and then start the chase all over again. That's it for the basics though. Aimed out sights, fire, score a hit against a survivor, reel them in, melee once, reload, rinse and repeat. Deathslinger is the fishing minigame of Dead by Daylight. And send tweet. You're probably wondering though, how does one avoid the big bad stun? How do I guarantee more consistent hits and downs? This concern has to do with positioning, and it's unfortunately a skill set that you learn to recognize with time and practice on the killer. It's also arguably the most important component of his kit. I have some examples I can give you, but keep in mind that these are general guidelines and not always the rule. So you've speared a survivor, but they're behind the Deathslinger's mortal enemy, a pallet. Because the end component of the Deathslinger's power is technically an M1 hit, just like every other killer, you cannot M1 over pallets. So your only options are to reel the survivor while pulling the chain through the obstacles on the side and swing around the backside to let the chain break, or to swing to avoid getting stunned. Here's how it works. In this instance, I'm exactly parallel to the survivor behind the pallet. This means that I am at the maximum distance that it will take me to go around the obstacles on either side to hit the survivor. What I need to do is quickly take inventory of the size of the obstacles surrounding the pallet and immediately start moving towards the smaller one by circumference so that I can get to the survivor before the chain runs out. We can cut out all of that extra time moving if we spear the survivor across the pallet from an angle. Here, since I have speared the survivor at more of a diagonal, I'm already partially clear of the obstacle to my left and can now use that extra time I've given myself to close the distance with more certainty. This becomes even easier with the fact that the chain meter doesn't actually appear until half a second after the spear lands. So if you start moving as soon as or even before the shot lands, you'll clear even more distance around structures. I don't know if this is intentional design or not, but it helps me out and behavior hasn't changed it yet, unlike the Plague who recently got a very confusing bug fix to her power. So let's say that this more ideal spear situation hasn't happened, or you're playing on Aerie of Crows where every pallet is behind some massive brick structure. How do we handle this instead? Aside from Aerie of Crows being Deathslinger's least deadly map, for a reason I'm sure you can understand, there's a little flowchart that I have in my head that I use to help me decide if I should let the chain break or swing to avoid the stun. If the survivor is not already injured and I know that I cannot hit them after a spear, I will let the chain break. If a survivor is already injured and is corralling themselves into a dead zone, or if lunging will help me close the distance faster than getting stunned on the wrong side of a structure, that's when I choose to lunge after landing a spear. I also tend to swing and hit a wall because the recovery time feels faster when I do. This might be a placebo effect, but I know that it's true for the pig for some reason. In other words, use the chain to injure and zone people. If the slinger is the one getting zoned by being stunned, then swing into a wall intentionally to close the distance, like using a lunge to clear distance when following a survivor falling off of a high drop. Another way to avoid having the chain break is by strafing with the slinger and moving your mouse while a survivor is speared. Think of the interaction as if the slinger and the speared survivor are two rocks tied together by a length of string, and two different people move each rock individually. If you move to the side and pull your mouse to the side to avoid an obstacle, the string in our visual metaphor will avoid collision with obstacles. The same thing works with looking upwards, where the chain will easily clear a lot of lower heighted obstacles. An easy example is the infamous reception desk pallet in RPD. If a survivor is camping by this pallet, you can easily fire, harpoon them, look upwards while reeling and moving to make the chain avoid the desk, and get an easy hit. You deny the pallet and turn these semi-safe loops into extremely unsafe ones against this killer. Again, these examples are general guidelines, and I can't possibly point out every single gap in every map's geometry where this works out because I'm still experimenting and learning myself. If you're having problems with survivors easily swinging into and getting caught in the map's geometry, try walking backwards while reeling. When you walk backwards, it gives the survivor far less control over their horizontal movement and grants the Deathslinger more hits overall. It's not always guaranteed, but it does help. Keep in mind that walking backwards and walking forwards while reeling changes nothing about the time it takes for the survivor to reach the Deathslinger. Even though Deathslinger moves slower when walking forwards while reeling, the time to reel does not change. And the final general power tip I can give you, Deathslinger can reel survivors through and hit them over window vaults. You do have to be pressed up against the windowsill to be in melee range, but it does make some windows generally unsafe to play against this killer. Windows like the Banquet Hall window and Garden of Joy, however, do not pose the same threat because of the difference in elevation after a survivor vaults it. But Sylvie, I was born without FPS hands and have been cursed to the land of League of Legends since 2015. How do I aim with the Deathslinger? Now this is the part that I've basically lifted from Akino's Deathslinger guide video, which again I highly recommend you check out for his more consistent gameplay and in-depth analysis. He also has a video that teaches you an easy method for learning what your ideal sensitivity is. Mine is 40% at 800 DPI. What I've learned from Akino is the following. The Deathslinger's gun is a projectile weapon, meaning that it takes time from the projectile to travel before it reaches its destination. A counterexample is the weapons in Valorant, which are referred to as hit scan, meaning that the damage instance happens the instant that the mouse button is pressed. The speed of the projectile is the same as a fully charged Huntress hatchet, so if you've played Huntress before, you can kind of lead shots in the same way that you do with her. If a survivor is close by, as in slightly outside of lunge range, aiming at the center of the survivor hitbox using the tip of the iron sights will guarantee a hit. I mostly do this in instances where I know they're about to round a corner or are near a pallet that I need to pull them away from before they can drop it. At longer ranges, it becomes a little more tricky, but there's a great consistent visual indicator that the game gives us to help. On specifically the default weapon, aiming down sights yields 3 points of interest, the center iron sights and these 2 prongs on either side of the weapon. The reason why the default weapon is important for this is because none of the other weapons really have the same visual indicator, but also because the default weapon is the only weapon that has its sights perfectly calibrated. Again, Aquino spends a solid 12 minutes showcasing each individual cosmetic gun that the Deathslinger owns to prove this point, and has a tier list ranking them on overall accuracy. Death to Bayshore is the only weapon that has its sights calibrated properly, to where the tip of the iron sights is accurate to where the shot will land. Anyway, back to the 3 points. If a survivor is running straight away from you, aim with the center point. If a survivor is at a medium to long distance and is strafing in a straight direction across your screen, lining up one of the side points with their head as they are running will guarantee a hit. If they are moving diagonally away from you, then line up the side crosshair with their butt instead. These 3 general aiming points will perfectly lead the shot, given that survivors aren't looking behind them and anticipating it. Again, that's something that you'll have to learn to recognize with time and practice. Now you might be wondering, why are we aiming at butts? This is because Dead by Daylight has some messed up hitboxes that we can take advantage of. A survivor's hitbox isn't tight to their body, but is instead a kind of capsule shape that is anchored at their pelvis even if they're running. As a result, a survivor's hitbox also rounds out just slightly above their head. Keep in mind that the Deathslinger's power is an extremely small projectile, and if it hits any part of the survivor hitbox, the survivor will be speared. The animation looks a bit silly because if you hit them in the ankle, the animation snaps to show them being hit in the chest, but come on. This is Dead by Daylight we're talking about. If we were expecting quality game design, we were looking in the wrong place. Here's an example from an older video by Bronx, again on RPD.
Look at that hitbox. That is so dumb. I can't even see her. I literally can just see the very, very tip of her hair, man.
I will reiterate to make myself absolutely clear on this. The hitbox of the survivor goes slightly over their head, and if the slinger's power hits any part of their hitbox, the survivor will be speared. Aim low often because a headshot makes no difference in hits, and also if a survivor crouches, you'll still be guaranteeing that you'll hit them. And also, don't be afraid to launch shots that might clip the top of a survivor's hitbox that is hiding behind an obstacle. And on to the last thing that I know about the Deathslinger, what are the add-ons and builds for this killer? Your best add-ons by far are the ones that reduce reload time between shots and the chain break stun duration. The add-ons that reduce a missed shot cooldown are good, especially if you're learning because it lets you take shots more often. Iridescent Coin is a wickedly good add-on if you can consistently hit shots from 12 plus meters away, though it's generally unfavorable for beginners. Aquino, the Deathslinger main I've been mooching information from for the sake of this video, prefers the Wanted Poster add-on, which increases the movement speed Deathslinger moves at while scoped in. The Jaw Smasher add-on does the same thing, but the 1.5% bonus is negligible and should generally be avoided. Prison Chain increases the time you have before the chain breaks and is often used in competitive scenes, but might mess up your sense of timing around pallets if used too often. Then there are the rest of the add-ons, all of which are generally best left alone for a variety of reasons. There are add-ons that increase the Deep Wound Mend timer, which applies to all endurance hits, but I tend to avoid this because it's only good if you find yourself constantly dropping chases against survivors. This isn't Wraith. Deathslinger isn't best served as a hit and run type killer. A couple of add-ons reduce Slinger's terror radius when he aims down sights, and typically speaking you want to clear the map as quickly as possible, so reducing your terror radius while also massively slowing your movement speed down is a combo that only works in specific meme builds. The other iridescent add-on, the Hellsure Iron, grants the Deathslinger the undetectable status effect when he spears a survivor. The effect lingers for 10 seconds after the chain is broken or the survivor is hit, and this doesn't work out because 1. The survivor whom you've speared knows that you're there regardless if you're undetectable or not by virtue of the rod of metal sticking out of their chest. 2. The gun is so freaking loud that nearby survivors will know approximately where you are at all times anyway. 3. The 10 seconds starts as soon as the chain breaks, meaning that if you M1 or are stunned by the chain breaking, you actively lose a few seconds of this add-on's timer, making it even more difficult for you to transfer that undetectable pressure. A couple of the add-ons apply the mangled status effect, but following the nerf to the mangled status effect recently, these aren't really worth running as slowdown add-ons anymore. Plus, their timers don't stack, unlike the reload add-ons. 2 of the Slinger's add-ons increase the reeling speed, which sounds good on paper, but can actively work against you by letting a survivor get caught behind an obstacle faster than you could strafe to avoid it otherwise. And then there's the Rickety Chain add-on. Just don't run this. It makes the chain break faster and it gives you more blood points if you hit nearby shots. Anything over 12 meters will negate the blood point bonus, yet you'll still have the faster chain break debuff. Now on to perks. Obviously, with the current killer perk meta, slowdown perks are always generally good. I personally prefer Pain Res and Surge because I don't have to spend time kicking gens when I could be reloading and picking up the next chase. Anything that has to do with M1 hits is good for Slinger, and yes, Coup de Grace does extend the lunge distance you get after spearing a survivor. Brutal Strength helps with clearing safe pallets. Agitation and Starstruck is a classic snowball combo that Slinger can get some terrifying use out of. Lightborn is good in case you're someone like me who runs into background player every match. No Way Out helps buy more time in case we miss some of those more vital shots in the early game. And heck, you should check out this video I made about the Silent Sniper build. It's another pretty funny build. Thankfully, Slinger is strong enough that he doesn't need to rely on a full slowdown build. He's diverse enough that he can play just about anything so long as the perks sound like they have synergy. I mean, go nuts, have fun, and I hope you all learned something today, as I am also constantly learning how to get better at this silly little game. Thank you all so much for watching. Tomorrow I'll have a video that showcases a game that I recorded directly after finishing this video, where I will point out the things I did right and the mistakes I made so that you can hopefully understand more of what I've said here. Alright, that's it for me. Now get out of here. Safe travels, and goodbye.